Why is it so important to consider investment as an option on the table?
Female founders are seriously underfunded. It is absolutely shocking how men in finance still don't buy it, find the biggest pile of cash and get as close to it as possible. 80% of women surveyed felt like their doctor didn't listen to them. The NHS has fallen so far from grace. The comments that one of them said to me was like, well, you're coping. I have never talked publicly about this before, playing to win exclusive. And I think if I was ever going to open up about this for the very first time ever, this would be the place to do it. My limbs are essentially packing up. I see death at the door. My life is ending. My body is physically shutting down. Shall we open up then and share that story?
If you're comfortable
Yeah,
to.
of course.
Before we get into today's episode, I just want to ask you a really quick favour. If you are enjoying Playing to Win and are excited for all the amazing conversations we are about to have, please consider liking and subscribing. It means the absolute world for us, and it means that we can have so many more amazing guests like the one we've got today. Today's guest is a top 20 UK female founder. She is a public speaker for some of the biggest brands in the world, including LinkedIn, Soho House. She's a mentor, she's a marketing strategist, she's a VC scout, and she is the host of Top 20 Business Podcast, Strategy and Tragedy. And she is a fucking ray of sunshine. So, Steph Melodia, welcome to Playing to Win.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm impressed
so
that you
nice.
remembered my 17 million job titles. So kudos to you.
Kudos to you for those accolades. I feel like that is such an impressive list of achievements.
It's just an ADHD career, that's all it is. It's just a different job, a different day. Honestly,
totally
I need to
relate to that.
stay active.
No, I love that so much. So we are kicking off every episode with our version of Would You Rather. So I'm going to ask you a scenario and then you can decide whether you're going to play to win or play it safe.
Okay, I'm excited.
So you're a business owner. You've got a huge vision. You've got a really good strategy and the drive, which, as we know, is one of the most important things. But you've got no cash to execute your idea. Do you play to win, go all in on the fundraising, give away some equity early and get that funding in so you can launch fast and big? Or do you play it safe, keep full control, bootstrap as quickly as you can, but you run the risk of moving too slowly and never actually getting it off the ground?
Okay, I love that question. And the way it's framed, I'm clearly being led with the first route. If you'd asked me that same question, I think about a decade ago when I started my last business, it would have been the latter. It would have been, I want to do this my way. I want to figure this out. I had no clue whatsoever when it came to investing and getting backing. So we can talk more about that in a minute. But I think now I've kind of scratched that itch. I would play to win. And I know that it's better to have a small piece of a large pie as opposed to a large piece of a small pie. So I'd go and play to win.
I love that so much. And I think something that you touched on there is that mindset shift.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that so many business owners, especially when they're starting out and they're kind of at that SME level, maybe fall into that trap of, investment feels really daunting. It's so overwhelming. I do not even know where to start.
Yeah.
And can you just give us like a bit of a insight into that and kind of why is it so important to consider investment as an option on the table?
Okay, so we can run through the different options. What I would caveat, first of all, as it relates to fundraising, is that I don't run a VC firm myself. I am a scout for one. I have not raised money for myself as a founder. I've worked with over 100 of them. So where I'm coming from is that privileged perspective of kind of being at the epicenter of all of that and having operated in the world of startups and mingling with quite a few VCs over the years, I just kind of bring what I've observed and the knowledge through all of that over the past kind of decade or so. So I just want to make sure we sort of get that caveat.
That is a lot of knowledge. I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say.
I'm also aware of my shortcomings, which is I haven't gone through that process myself directly as a founder, but that being said, I have worked very closely with them and I'm very empathetic. So I feel the pain, I feel the rejection, I feel everything. So let's get into the practicalities. So as I said, I'll run through the different options when it comes to fundraising for your business. Just again, caveats out the way, before I do get into that, what I would mention is that if you are onto something, if you've got the resource and you've got the tailwinds of the market conditions kind of working for you with all of it. If you can, then it is always preferable to keep as much equity of your business as possible. Because I think coming especially from the world of tech and VC, it's very, very easy to get sucked into the kind of the ego, the LinkedIn humble bragging, the sifted headlines, blah, 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 and seeing how so-and-so has raised this much money or competition of just like double the size of their team, et cetera, et cetera. And we're definitely coming out of that phase of all this kind of hot air and market growth at all costs. But it's just important to remember that it's not always what it seems, and that taking someone else's money does come at a price. And when you get that wrong, which has happened, that can really seriously backfire on the business. So that, I guess, is sort of like the second sort of caveat. So like if you can keep as much of your equity as possible, if you can bootstrap and self-fund it, then great. That being said, another part of the conversation here is that female founders are seriously underfunded. Now, I think anyone who knows anything about this industry will know the headline stats, which actually used to be less than 2% of UK venture capital goes to all female founder teams. I actually read this morning that that's actually dropped, I think, to 1.4% or something. It's 1 point something.
Okay.
So it's actually gone down even further. That's for all female founder teams. If you actually segment that out further by race, what won't come as a surprise is that it's even lower than that measly, like single-digit % for Black female founders as well. So these are some of the headline stats that we all know, but I think it's important to remember what's useful and what isn't. When is that helpful and when isn't it?
Absolutely.
So now at the time of recording, obviously not sure when this is going to air exactly, but tomorrow is International Women's Day. So we've been surrounded by this content and posts and amazing events and all this stuff that's really brought that conversation even more to the forefront. But I think I'm kind of split with this, because I think, when are those stats helpful? Your reaction there perfectly like summed up like the dire state of funding when it comes to female founders. What I'm cautious of is to not put anyone off, to not like, I don't want to continue to re-emphasize the bad and re-emphasize the negative and put anyone off with that. That being said, it is the current state of play. And what I've come to realize is that having those sorts of statistics in your back pocket come in handy when you're speaking to men and when you're speaking to male investors or male GPs.
Interesting.
Or guys who run VC firms, because I bring up this conversation to men because we all talk about it all the time.
Absolutely.
Women know, women bring it up to other women. We have these echo chambers where the same message is being bounced around. Take that outside. And Sophie, I kid you not, it is absolutely shocking how men in finance, and you think you're speaking their lingo by giving them the numbers and the research and the reports and the statistics, still don't buy it. They still don't buy it. So this is where I go back to, when are these stats helpful? What serves you? And when is it useful? So I think it's useful to be able to whip out these numbers and back up your point when you're speaking to people who still need educating, who still are very biased, who still see things their way, who have their own unconscious bias or ways of viewing the world, etc., etc. Coming back to, okay, how does that serve us as women? We can pick and choose the data how we kind of want to a degree. There are other statistics that we can bring out that actually show that we're making progress. So we've actually had a record number of women launching businesses recently.
Amazing.
The number, I think, doubled between like 2018 to 2022. We've also got a record number of female founder resources, female-only angel network groups, of female-focused funds. There's the Female Founders Fund in New York. There's Pink Salt Ventures here in the UK. We've got Hermesa, which is a women's only angel network. So I definitely believe that getting women, first of all, is more women need more money, full stop. Like it's just as simple as that. One of the best pieces of financial advice I've ever heard is find the biggest pile of cash and get as close to it as possible.
I like that. That's a good piece of advice.
Where's the biggest pile of cash? And get as close as possible as you can to it. And so as it relates to the investment space, mentioning female founder funds and angel networks, it's also getting more women decision makers, more women investors, angels,
Absolutely.
VCs, LPs, GPs, not to back this amazing batch of female founders that have doubled since 2018. So that's a little bit of the Rose Report.
Yeah,
like, that's all the
absolutely.
numbers and
landscape
statistics.
that we're kind of operating from.
I know I've been talking a lot. Shall I go into the funding options for women on the
Yeah,
back of
that
that?
would be really helpful because I think it's so interesting that we all know these stats, and I
Yeah.
feel like it's very much a hot topic, especially when we come up to International Women's Day, and you know, that real narrative around female founders is always there. But I think that it's so important to understand the actual landscape behind it. And before we jump into funding options, it would just be really good from your insider perspective to just, why is it that women aren't getting that money? Is it just as
there's a few
simple as
reasons.
there aren't enough women investors
Yeah.
who, you know, it's that, you know, I think it's the homophily principle, where you invest in what you recognise
Right.
and what's familiar to you. So men invest in men, white people invest in white people, and there's just not enough diversity with money, which I think we all know the state of the world. But yeah, is that what it is? Is it that, you know, I've even seen things, well, women just don't come up with as good business ideas.
Ridiculous.
We know that's ridiculous.
Absolutely
but
ridiculous.
Like, what is that?
Well, I'll go a step further just on that. I love that line, because I actually think, my kind of hot take is, I actually think there's way too much of an emphasis on the idea for a business.
Absolutely.
I think too many people, especially like budding entrepreneurs who are waiting for that epiphany, that light bulb moment to strike. They're trying to come up with like a great idea, something that's never been thought of before, so groundbreaking, USP, or someone's already done that.
Yeah.
Not true at all. Honestly, not true. Like, way too much emphasis is put on the idea, when actually it's a whole other, it's the market, basically, is the short answer. But answering your other great question, which I love, which is, why is it? Why? What's the reason behind those statistics? Sophie, I love that question. Honestly, I think we need a 3-hour podcast just for that. But honestly, it's all of the things. It is. It's the same as, why do we still have gender inequality in society? It's all of the things. It is, exactly to your point, it is the unconscious bias. I never heard of that term before, so I love that, the homophilia, whatever.
Principle, yeah.
That's true, that's unconscious bias. We really resonate. I mean, we are humans, we're very flawed as humans. Actually, on that, there was this really interesting study, which is in the book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. I'm not sure if I pronounced his surname correctly.
Oh, I love a good book recommendation.
It's a chunky one. It's a pretty chunky one. I think they could definitely do a nice little, just take all the best bits from it. Maybe that's the job I need to do. But one of the really interesting studies was in this business development, like outreach sales campaign, where it's a little bit dated. It was a few decades ago, but they sent out these handwritten letters, and they did this test on matching the name of the recipient to the name of the sender. So, for example, if we're sending it to, what's a good example to come off with here? If we're sending a letter to Stevie, we'd sign off from Stephanie, maybe, or trying to think of just like similar names.
Okay, like a Sophie and a Sophia.
Exact
kind of vibe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Or like,
interesting.
Timmy from Timothy, or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? And the response rates absolutely shot up. I don't have those stats immediately to hand.
No.
But they did, and obviously they did like a controlled experiment, and like completely different names, and then obviously foreign sounding names. So anyway, it's another proof point that we're flawed human beings, and we all have this. Like, I'm not sat here holier than thou. Like, we all are victim to these kind of, it's called unconscious bias for a reason. Exactly. So anyway, so back to the point. So that's definitely one of them. I think also there's definitely an argument for how, what's the right term, like bolshier, for want of a better term, that guys are, like the hubris comparatively to a lot of women, the confidence that they have, the belief, the conviction. Women tend to be more kind of women of their word. Yeah. We don't make promises that we can't keep. We tend to go in with, you know, pitching what we do feel confident about, but in order for us to feel confident about things, we need to have much more evidence than guys do. I mean, case in point, look at Adam Newman is the best example of that, co-founder of WeWork. Yeah. And there's many, many, many more examples of that. There's the odd outlier female who then goes to prison, but that's a whole other separate thing. So there's a whole mixture of it. And exactly to your point, and what we were saying before, I don't think enough women are in charge of the purse strings themselves. And then of course we've got the motherhood penalty too. Like that's a big challenge, is as much as things are getting better on the shared parental leave and childcare and everything else, that's still a really big problem, because
Massively.
the mum is still the default caregiver.
Yeah.
And that just kind of puts the attention on that if you are having a family, and not to mention the financial practicalities of all of that as well. So there's a lot that's all wrapped into that. But I would love to shift the conversation to not what's wrong and what's in the way, but okay, how can we like, knowledge is power. How can we now use that to push forward and make progress?
That's exactly it. And I think that's what, you know, like I've sat here on a previous episode and just sort of said, I'm so sick of gender gap. And as a woman, like you said, those stats, when we need to use them, they are fantastic. But actually, let's do something about it, and let's take that stats and let's shift that conversation from we're not getting investment to, right, okay, we're going to do something about this, and we're going to change the system, and we're going to take it into our own hands to make a change, because no one's going to give it to us, as we know. So I think when it comes to female founders and their mindset towards investment, just give us like a bit of an insight into what funding options are on the table, and why should we be considering them.
Yeah, love that. Okay, before I do again, sorry, I keep building this up, but do you know who echoed basically what you just said earlier this week? Again, we're in International Women's Day, all
everywhere,
all the events and everything else. I was at an amazing event with Holly Tucker, MBE, who was the co-founder
Not on the High Street.
of Not on the High Street. Well
She
done,
is just fantastic, isn't she?
My new girl crush. I'm obsessed.
Our new feminist icon. Yeah, 100%.
She is fantastic.
Yeah.
She was amazing, and she basically said very similar things. She was like, we need to set out to change the system. And what was exciting about, again, sort of shifting now more to the more positive and what's actually happening now, is she is in a position where she co-founded her business. She set up her very successful company about 20 years ago now at this point, when there was even less, when there was much less help, when there were much fewer women's networks, etc., etc. So what is exciting about what's happening now is we're finally seeing the women coming up through the ranks and the actual positive impact of that taking effect.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Because she now, because she's gone through it, she's earned her stripes, she's validated, she set up her successful business, financially successful off the back of that, feeling infuriated at the system and how slow progress has been over the years. Now, I'm sure she's fine with sharing, because she shared this at this public event anyway, she's on her second, she's on a new venture, and she's struggling to get funding for it. And so it's kind of the, not to keep on with like being exacerbated, but it's the straw that's broke the camel's back with her.
Yeah.
And now that she is in the position where, you know, just mentioning about the motherhood penalty and childhood costs and everything, again, because she's at that point in her career and she's at that stage in her life, her kids are a bit more grown up. She did her last business 20 years ago. She now is not taking no for an answer. And she echoed what you're saying, is you need to change the system now. We can't keep on rehashing these stats.
No.
As much as I said before, the good thing is you can...
I think there is a place for them, isn't there? And it's an educational place for it.
There is, but I think also we really need to pick our battles.
Absolutely.
And I think our energy is one of the most valuable resources that we have. And to my point on, okay, we can whip out these stats when we need to in conversations, but it's not going to change. Like I said, like I've done it before with these male investors. They don't buy it.
No.
They maybe need to, I don't know, hear it another 100 times, or have something happen to them, or have a daughter. How many times?
I know.
Have you come across a man
I know
who has a daughter and that suddenly makes them see women as humans?
Honestly, I've actually had conversations recently about various different things, including women's safety, and literally have been like, how would you feel if that was your daughter?
Yeah.
And then it's almost like that penny drops and they're like, oh my God, yeah.
It's kind of disgusting as well.
You shouldn't have to have a daughter.
It's insane. The amount of times that's come up, or where their wife, there's something, met with someone as well, and something really bad happened to their wife, and they go on to mansplain to me. Actually, this is to do with women's health, which we're going to get into as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
They went on, this really tragic thing happened. The wife is fine in the library. Yeah. But they went on to tell me about this tragedy with their wife, went on to mansplain to me the state of the healthcare for women, went on to reveal how underfunded women's health is.
You're like, dude, I know.
I mean, okay, there's a list longer than our arms of problems in the world.
Yep.
And again, we can't care about everything at once, or at least make a change with everything, or it's just too much, it's too overwhelming. So, okay, I get that like these things are only going to come into your life when they happen to naturally or whatever, but at the same time, getting back on track with female founders, women in business, entrepreneurship, investing. The other thing here, which, you know, there's just so much that doesn't square up for me on so many levels. I think it's really, really easy to hear our voices as women and hear us speak as women about women's issues, and divorce this being a woman's voice. This is also the thing, by the way, a white man's voice is just the default.
100%.
It's just the default. But when it's female or when it's black or brown or whatever, you know, what I want to divorce from this that doesn't square up from an investment standpoint is that if we do look at the analysis on the ROI, women they deliver outsized returns. So if you're an investor,
it's crazy.
I'm glad we've got this on camera so we can see Sophie's reaction.
Yeah, 100%.
So if we take out the facts, like, okay, like you don't need to be a good person. You're a narcissistic, self-serving. You want to get rich. You're in the VC industry. Like, checks out. Like, let's look at the reality here. Not everyone, but like, there's a lot of these individuals, right? You're attracted to this industry for a particular reason.
Yeah.
You want to get rich. This is an extremely well-performing asset class. So if we take out the fact that like you just don't want to be a nice person and support the women in your life, then do it for the investment case.
You're going to make more money from it. Like, literally, like you said, that is the bottom line. And to go back to your reference to Holly Tucker, has she not proven herself that she's more than capable of turning over a business and bringing in that ROI for investors?
And Holly's story is, I'm sure this will not come as a shocker to you whatsoever, but is not the only one.
No.
Time and time and time again, I keep coming up, and women are constant. And this is the thing with the Holly Tucker example. I think it's another trap we can fall into is feeling hopeful and feeling like, oh, these stats are so shocking. Surely someone is going to see that and change it.
Completely.
And then time keeps going by. I mean, again, this is actually really, really pivotal moment to be sat here chatting to you, Sophie, because around basically 5 years ago today, I put on a massive International Women's Day event, which of course we didn't know at the time, but was the last time we all got together before the pandemic 5 years ago. And the stats that I'm hearing now, and you know, these Black Swan events provide really clear markers in time, right? So the fact that it's like 2025, it just so happens to be these nice round numbers as well, right? So it's like 2025, International Women's Day, it's really marking this time of the year. I very, very clearly remember my same International Women's Day event 5 years ago. And not only were the stats we were saying were similar, but actually the stats are worse now. So this is where, sorry, I don't want to keep going down this like
I think it's so important though. It's so important.
But it should, going back to like picking our battles and managing our energy, is we need to funnel that in the right way. And we need to use that indignance and disbelief and frustration into, to your point, like progress, positive action in the same way that Holly Tucker and others, there's a movement that's definitely happening, right? It's rising, and amazing women like you and what you're working on in this show and everything, it's all kind of going in that direction. So funding options. We've teased that enough.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of women that I speak to, it's not even on their radar. They don't know anything about it.
Exactly.
So
perfect. And it's scary.
It's so scary.
Exactly. Cool. All right. So let's go into it. So really practical tips. So first of all, I'm going to kick off with the closest thing to free money, which is government funding. And that comes in the form of grants and R&D tax credits is another kind of like break that the government give you.
Okay.
Again, I haven't gone through that process myself. It's been very much as an observer in this ecosystem over the past decade. But I do know it's the closest you get to free money. So if you are working on something that is innovative in some respect, so all the details of whatever's currently live will be on the gov.uk website. So that would be your number one go-to. I say it's the closest to free money because you don't need to pay it back. It's government funding. It's literally in the country's interest to
Absolutely.
develop an innovation ecosystem and have these exports that are very sorely missing. And just to very, very briefly touch on the geopolitical thing quickly.
Yep, absolutely.
We're flanked here. I mean, I'm not an imperialist, but like we're flanked here between two superpowers. I'm not going to touch on World War III, but like on the tech business thing, we'll keep it to that. You know, we've got the States over to the west, and we've got, you know, Meta, Google, all the rest of it. We've got like China to the east with ByteDance, you know, TikTok, Alibaba. Not even the UK, but Europe as a whole. What have we got to show for it? Spotify. Literally, that's it, and that's Sweden. Like so, like those, like Meatballs, ABBA, and Spotify. So like,
what a winning combination! Can I just say, what a vibe in itself.
Listen to ABBA on Spotify while having a meatball.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
So not bad at all. Quick plug, I'm actually going to be heading to Sweden for the very first time next month. Stockholm is the number one city for my podcast, weirdly. So shout out to any Swedes.
Oh my God, amazing.
Giving you the love. No idea why or how. That. Anyway, so the UK is falling really far behind. So that's, sorry, a bit of me nerding out on the context as to why it's literally in the country's interest. And I said about being an imperialist because we literally went from being the most powerful nation, obviously loads of bad stuff with that as well. But like we don't have really much to show for innovation, really. So
completely agree.
But with that is the opportunity, right? So we've got that opportunity. So it's in the government's interest, government grants, government funding. Check that out on the website. I say closest again to free money because it is a lot, as you would expect with anything governmental. There's a lot of legwork that goes into like
of course,
the admin, the paperwork. And there was a whole furore last year, actually, when they didn't actually deliver as much as they said they were going to do. But we had to fight back to then get what we were owed in the first place. Anyway, sorry.
Honestly, no, it's all just so relevant though. Like, and in terms of, I think what you're doing so well is painting a picture of actually how difficult it is to just get to the funding.
Do you know what I mean? That though. That's not my intention. It's not difficult. You can do it. We need more. It's fine. It's fine. I'm here to help you.
But I think it's about like just do it for yourself, and no matter what that barrier is in front of you, you can do it.
Do it for yourself. Do it for other women. Do it for like, I mean, your country as well, as I say, and even having like the export factor. Anyway, so there's loads of reasons why you should, and it's not. And the thing is, this has been done before. Like, this isn't as if, you know, we've name dropped a few incredible women in business. Like, it's definitely not impossible at all. Like, you can do it. So we've got the government grants. So that's first of all. Moving on from that, the next best funding option for any entrepreneur is angels. Now, the reason why is angels, if you can find the right person, they not only bring their capital, but they bring everything else that any other person would to the team in terms of contacts, network, advice. There's a lot more value that they can bring when you do get it right. So the other great thing about that as well is in terms of the payback policy, if you like, they are looking for a return on their investment. This isn't the same as the government funding thing, but it's not the same as VCs, which we'll get onto. VCs, which stand for venture capital firms, they have people that they also need to pay back the money to, which are called LPs, and that stands for limited partners. Right. Guess what? They're all fat, rich white men. So we'll get onto that. Exactly. But basically, okay, I'll explain the VC thing and how it compares with angels. Basically, angels will it would be their own money. And with some family offices, that's kind of like another step up. That's like a bigger version of like angels. So because it's their own money, whether they've exited their own business before, whether like they come from wealth, could be loads of different reasons why they have a big, lovely pot of cash that they're sat on. What that links to, so I'm not forgetting everything here, it links to the government support too, because there's also something called the SEIS and the EIS schemes, which is a tax incentive for these investors, as well as VCs, which give them 50% back on the investment that they make. So it's very attractive. So angels and family offices, when it's their own money, they're not under the same pressure in terms of the amount and in terms of timeline that they need to pay back to their like backers. And thanks to tax breaks like the SEIS scheme, it's also from their perspective a much better use of their money. So again, not everyone is just doing everything out of the goodness of their own heart, you know. So like we all need to win in this, right?
Yeah,
we all need to play to win. And so it works for them.
Yeah.
So like play into that. So then onto the VCs, the way it works with them is that so they will go out and raise a fund from what I mentioned before, LPs. The VC model in the kind of classical like tech Silicon Valley sort of way is they will, let's take for simplicity, they'll invest in like 10 companies in their portfolio, and we'll just use simple numbers. They go in with this very like high risk, high reward mentality.
Yeah.
With the expectation that the majority of the portfolio is not going to deliver what's called outsized returns to their LPs. So what they need to do is, they know the majority isn't going to, the minority, and let's say for simplicity, one, is going to deliver 10x to more than make up for all of the other ones.
Okay.
So they not only deliver a return to their investors, the LPs, but it covers everything that they've kind of lost by taking the bet on the other ones.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
So it's a very, it's quite an extreme model. And if you can get into it, great. But what I don't think people talk enough about is that if you're, one thing is getting that investment in the first place from the VC. It's also, we haven't even touched on like how much work goes into a fundraise, which is the case for having like a co-founder, because someone's still got to keep the business running while you're fundraising. What people don't talk about is if you're not part of that, let's say 9 of the 10 that don't make it, we don't talk about you not being the favorite in that batch of their portfolio.
That's so interesting, because that's not even an angle that I've ever considered or even thought about. But yeah, like tell us more about that, because as a founder, you've just gone through this probably quite aggressive fundraise and quite a brutal experience to then be like, oh, okay, so I'm not number one. So what now?
I think any investor, would say they want everyone in their portfolio to do well. And I'm sure they would all try to be as supportive as they can. And everyone does talk about added value because we all want to win. We want to set up everyone for success. But again, I don't know, I haven't been on the inside of that to know what are the implications if you're not the winner. Bearing in mind also, maybe I haven't already mentioned this, but the time scale with VC is also about 5 to 10 years. So you're also kind of like on the clock with that as well. So we're not talking about like, oh, who's performed the best this quarter. Like it takes years. So it's not as if it's like, oh, we've bagged all this and now we're not the favorite. But it does take time. And I think it's just don't forget what they're in there for. They're in there to make a return, basically. And if you're doing something that's so high risk and you're doing something that's in this like innovative, disruptive like tech space, nobody has the crystal ball to that. So it's taking a risk, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that when we talk about investment, I think that is why some people do go a bit like, this is just way too risky for me to be able to do. But actually, we also know that whether it is the government funding, whether it's angels, whether it's VCs, the reward is also potentially so high as well. And like you said, that real not wanting people to be scared from it, because as we've said, we need more women in these positions.
And I think going deeper on that for a quick second, so that was just a bit of a practical overview of like the funding options, and there's loads of great resources and stuff online as well. But actually mentioning that, there's a great resource by Considered Capital. If anyone wants to check that out, Google it. They've got like a free directory of all these other like ways that you can get funding for your business. But what I just want to touch on with your great comment there, Sophie, to go just a level deeper here, which I think is necessary, is we're talking about money, which is one of the 2 resources that we have in this world. The other resource is our time. And time is something that we're never going to get back. And so funding, what it does, if there's any women listening that are like, oh, this feels like a risk, this is the first time, how does this actually work? I don't know if I'm quite ready for it. Money accelerates things for you. With my last business, and what I can talk about firsthand, and what I did do was my own bootstrapped business that I built from the ground up to a 6-figure turnover, profitable, award-winning company.
Just pause for a second. Amazing.
Thank you.
Continue.
But that took me the best part of 6 years. I mean, granted, there was a pandemic in that, and I'm not saying that that's a long amount of time or a short amount of time, but I'm just using it as an example. Having gone through that and like gone through the ropes myself, is depending on the sort of business that you're setting up, like I'm giving quite blanket advice here, but like one-on-one, I can be much more tailored. Depending on the sort of business that you're starting, you may need, like genuinely, there may be a real necessity for you to get funding to accelerate your learnings and acquire more data and evidence for you to get quicker to product market fit than either a competitor, which, by the way, if the competitor happens to be male founded, he stands a chance of getting more money more quickly than you anyway.
And
so
that's
setting them
a
up for
fact.
success.
That's not even just us sat here as two women. Those are the facts. Those are the data that we have to play with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got, I'm sort of putting the urgency on here because I said time is our finite resource.
Yeah.
So on a personal level, we're not going to be here forever. And not only that, but we also don't talk enough about our energy levels. This was another huge realization I had. I set up my business when I was still in my 20s, and it had never, Sophie, this is so naive and ignorant of me, I'm going to be completely honest, it had never even crossed my mind, genuinely, that my own energy was just not an infinite resource.
I can totally resonate with that. Like, I don't think that's naive. I think as young people,
we all take that for granted.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like when you think about our health, and like, I don't know what you were like in your 20s, but I definitely took mine for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 100 can totally relate. Sorry, I've just completely taken you off track.
No, totally, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's the whole, you know, we can have fun with this as well, but it's like the barely any hangover after a night out, you know, and then you're
straight
like
into the office.
Right.
And then God, could you imagine doing that now?
You're like suffering a week later.
Yeah.
So from a business perspective, the energy that you need as a founder to get something off the ground, and we'd love to talk about hustle culture and stuff as well. Like, I believe there's a time and a place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you're starting a business, you have to hustle. It's a non-negotiable. Sorry to break it to you. You have to get it off the ground at the beginning, in the early days. Pull back when you need to. Take care of yourself, absolutely. But that's the other thing, is so not only do we have finite time on this planet, but we don't always have that same energy level to constantly be running at 100% to build this business. So money, again, accelerates that for you. So not only is it collapsing the timescales, but it's actually it's a good energy strategy. Like, you're not going to have that constantly. And then factoring in the competition, which adds that next level of urgency as well, which I don't believe in the first mover advantage, and I've got loads of reasons why. So I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, just, again, this great idea, I need to launch it before someone else does. I don't believe in that whatsoever. But what I do believe is, if there is a male-led counterpart who's got 10 times the funding, has, you know, let's be honest, okay, fine, throwing money at something doesn't guarantee it's going to work, but it certainly makes it a whole lot easier along the way. So I just wanted to go deeper there for a second on the reasons why, if you're on the fence with it, you owe it to yourself and your family and other women and what this business could be to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that real mindset, like we were saying, like with men, they are so much more, let's go out and get it. Whereas we are so much more skeptical about, I think, our own potential. And there was actually a really interesting LinkedIn survey. It's really old now, but they basically saw, you know, men will apply for jobs that they're only 20% qualified for. Women need to be 80% to even consider applying for it. Like, and it just is that same thing of like, men are always judged on their potential, and it's women are always judged on what they've done so far.
And even then, it's not like the Holly Tucker example.
Perfect example, still not enough.
Two things I just want to take that further on. One is, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, and you may be listening in now, who are just like fuck it, be the change. I'm the outlier.
Yeah.
I don't care. And they are what I will give the skepticism to the gender gap reporting. What I will give like some slack to is, given these particular women who have succeeded, they are such a tiny minority. They are intrinsically outliers by being such extraordinary individuals.
Yeah.
That that in itself skews the data. Do you know what I mean? Because it's such a tiny minority, it's such a small segment. And then there was something else I was going to say, funny enough, actually, I think with the Holly Tucker talk again, she was so inspiring. She was saying, this subject of confidence comes up a lot in these conversations, and women not having enough, and blah, blah, blah. And again, I want to sort of not play devil's advocate, but just add another sort of stance to that, which is there are lots of women like me and you, and many others that will be sat on this seat, and others that are listening who do have the self-confidence. There's a couple of things within that. One is, again, how helpful is it to keep hearing these stories and these stats of like, women don't do it, and I'm like, well, I do it. Does that mean I'm a bitch? Does that mean I'm like, what's wrong with me? Am I so masculine?
We could talk about that forever, couldn't we? Like, honestly.
Well, just really quick, the second thing with that, which is what Holly said, which just absolutely loved, was, is it that we don't have enough confidence in ourselves, which like I challenge, or is it that there isn't enough confidence in us
from
others
externally?
Yeah. And that really struck a chord with me, because I have been in, I'm sure you have, and I'm sure so many of the listeners have been in so many situations where no, actually, like, I do believe in what I'm doing. I do back myself. I am confident. But you go into these situations, and like you saying, I think you just said before, Sophie, about women, like men can be judged on the potential, but women based on track record. And even then, it's that constant having to prove ourselves. It just happens all the time.
Absolutely. And what you just said, I can't tell you how many really emotional conversations I've had over the last few weeks with what we're doing with Ray and everything here about it. What it really boils down to is that person I'm speaking to, I believe in myself. I believe in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of women that also believe in that.
Yeah.
But it's you as the individual.
Yeah.
And do I take that as, oh, I wasn't confident enough in that situation, or actually you just didn't have enough confidence in me.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is that real, because all we then do as women is take that on board, internalize it.
Yeah.
Okay, now next time your confidence then is knocked because you've attributed it to something that is a flaw within you.
Yeah, you're totally right.
And it's not.
And applying a marketing strategy here as well is to persuade the persuadable. So this is another thing, so especially in startup marketing, which is my background, is you can waste so much money from a marketing perspective on campaigns, partnership, influencers, events, but the list goes on and on of like the ways that you can waste money. And the analogy here, the parallel is your energy, is wasting your energy, right? With the marketing strategy, the persuade the persuadable is, instead of trying to build this brand awareness with totally cold new audiences who have never heard of us before and don't quite get it and need the education and the downloads and the retargeting and the nurturing and 17 more touch points to then maybe, hopefully, get a conversion 18 months down the line. The parallel here with whether you're fundraising or just more broadly people who don't believe in you is, again, pick your battles, manage your energy. And those situations, like if you're pitching to someone or trying to sell into someone who's like, they're not getting it, they don't believe in you, move on. Like, just thank you next, because like you need to get those no's out the way to just get closer to those yeses.
Yeah, that is honestly such fantastic advice. And I think that it is so crucial when we are, so like, for example, as you know, I'm in women's health, and I read a horrendous report in The Guardian that said if you are raising investment and you are a femtech business and you have a female board, you are less likely to get funding than a man.
I mean, for some reason, flow boils my blood unlike anything else.
Same.
That's one of the very, very few. Saying it, I can like it's really here in my arms. It's right here.
Should have been
On
a
the
woman's success
inside
story.
of my arms, for some reason, gets me so angry. And I've had decades of training myself to manage my energy, because I don't want to be a martyr in this.
No.
I can't be a martyr.
No.
I can't I'm not going to die for the cause.
No.
You're no good to anyone. But yeah, something about that pissed me off.
Oh, honestly.
Pisses me off a lot.
And there was so much narrative around, this is amazing for women's health.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, this is a male
awful.
success story that should have been a woman's.
Yeah.
If we can't be the ones leading that narrative.
Yeah, absolutely infuriating.
It's just,
Yeah.
And yeah, I could go insane about that. So yeah,
same.
Let me take a breather from that one. But I think just
moment.
on that topic as well, Steph, in terms of energy levels and women's health, I think when we're talking about female business owners, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit with motherhood and those kinds of things, but we're also dealing with our health issues.
Yeah.
And that's something that is just so. We know there's no funding. We know there's no education. We just get on with it, and we always have, in terms of our periods, endometriosis, PCOS, so many other different women's health conditions that we're really only just learning about now.
Yeah, it's wild.
And someone like you, who is so unbelievably successful, you're a top 20 UK female founder. How incredible is that? But you've had your own, you were so vulnerable with me and shared your own women's health story with me. And I think there's so much that people could learn from that and feel less alone in what they're maybe going through.
Yeah. Shall we open up then
Let's
and share that
up.
story?
If you're comfortable
Yeah,
to.
of course. But do you know what I'm going to say, just to like big this up even more before I get started? Might break the fourth wall and look into the camera for this.
Yeah.
I have never talked publicly about this before. So this is Playing to Win exclusive, and I'm very happy to. And I think if I was ever going to open up about this for the very first time ever, this would be the place to do it. So,
oh my God, don't! I'm literally gonna cry.
It's totally true, Sophie.
Thank you.
It's totally true. Like what you're doing, what you're building, this and now this timing, everything about this could not be more perfect. So don't get emotional.
I didn't even pay her to say that, guys.
I'm a sponsored guest.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into story time.
Yeah.
So it was let me just think about the year for a sec, actually, to get the details right, because I know the details, like, they help to make the story. So I remember I was 27 years old. So what year would that have been exactly? So I think 2016 it must have been. Okay. So it was a Tuesday afternoon in 2016.
I love that this is such a huge part of your life that you can remember it in this much detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This just goes to show.
Yeah.
Thank you for recognizing that.
100%.
Goes to show. Exactly. So it was a Tuesday afternoon in 2016. And this was pre my last business. So I was in normal employment. So I was in a normal job in an office, and got up and went to the bathroom and locked myself in. This is like an office bathroom, kind of, daytime, afternoon. And I don't know how long I was in this bathroom for, but suddenly my body started like doing something. I started feeling horrific. I had no idea what was going on. And when you experience something for the very first time, it's quite scary, because it's unfamiliar. You don't know what's happening. So anyway, I started to experience this really extreme pain, and it was like a pain unlike any I'd ever experienced before, not only in terms of intensity, but the type of pain and everything else. So I'm struggling, and the pain is sending my body into this state where obviously my heart rate is elevated, I'm sweating, I'm feeling dizzy, I'm getting all of these other kind of secondary symptoms, all caused by just this pain at the root of it. This is getting worse and worse and worse. And bearing in mind, I'm conscious that I'm in the office bathroom in the daytime as well. And I'm aware that I've been away from my desk for a while, and I've got all those kind of running through my mind as well.
Yeah.
This is until the pain took over, and then eventually got so bad it sort of pushed it all out of my mind. But that's going on as well. it's getting worse and worse. And I start to feel pins and needles in my fingertips and my toes. And this numb sensation extends from my fingertips and toes into my hands and feet and into my wrists and ankles, my arms, my legs, and starts kind of going in like more and more sensory to my body. But my limbs are essentially packing up, and I start to lose like all feeling completely. And I start to like pinch myself and grab myself and try to like
Feel
do
something.
something to
Yeah.
feel. And I couldn't at all. And so it's getting worse and worse. Don't know what's happening, starting to feel nauseous. I think I had a couple of episodes where I had collapsed for different reasons in the past. So I have a propensity for like low blood pressure. So it's like, oh my God, am I going to collapse in here?
Yeah.
And who's going to find me and how are they going to find me? So it's getting worse. And then, no word of exaggeration, I see death at the door of this bathroom, like actual literal, the image
Yeah.
of death, tall in the cloak, and legitimately think I'm gonna die. That's it. This is where I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. My life is ending. My body is physically shutting down. I can feel it. I was like, oh, this is genuinely. So we should put a trigger warning on this. This is genuinely what it feels like to die. I can feel my body physically packing up and die. This is what it feels like. And seeing death at the door, I was like, this is it. I'm going to die 27 years old in this agency office.
At
this
work.
is what's going to happen at work.
This is
on
how
a
I'm
Tuesday
going out.
afternoon.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going.
And this was 2016 as well, just to throw this into the mix. So this is, what are we talking?
Over a decade ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
10 years ago.
Yeah, just under, exactly. Yeah. So this is a decade ago. So wild to put it into, but I'm right, but recounting the story,
I feel like I'm there
right
with
back
you.
there. Yeah.
I feel like I'm there with you. The level of detail that this has, you've remembered this in even being in Out of Sorts, and that it was so visceral.
Exactly. Perfect word for it. Yeah.
That you can remember this with such clarity.
And so genuinely unique scenario. I'd never experienced any of this before. It's my first time, so clearly it had this impact. And yeah, I remember, you know, the grey lino of the bathroom floor and the white, you know, sink next to me. And I can see all of it. I can see the chrome door handle on the door anyway. But yeah, this is almost a decade ago. And anyway, eventually, what again felt like eternity and sort of lost sense of time at this point, because when you're just feeling awful, you're just like, I don't even know how long it's even been. Eventually, sort of my body just sort of rode it out, and however long later, re-emerged from the bathroom. And at the time I was working, where I was physically sat in the office, happened to be surrounded by a lot of other women, and came out, and obviously I'm naturally quite pale anyway, but every woman in the office turned and saw me, and besides the fact I'd been in there for a while, and their faces dropped when they saw me, and they were, I mean, I didn't even see what I looked like, but
of course, I
almost saw myself reflected in their reactions when I came out, and they were just like, Steph, like, you look like a ghost, like, what the hell's happened? Really shocked, obviously must have looked terrible. Booked me an Uber, and this is a fun little like tech and business little overlap in the story as well, because like Uber was new in London, and this was like the hot new thing too. So like booked me an Uber, sent me home, but genuinely like at that point it's kind of like, well, I rode out the worst of it anyway, so fine, I'll just spend the last few hours at home and wait for my partner to get back. Anyway, it was through their encouragement and my partner, I mean, my co-workers, because they'd physically seen me, they visually saw what I looked like straight afterwards, and my partner, they were like, you need to see the doctor, like we just need to know like what's gone on, like what was this about? Very, very thankfully, I was very lucky to not only see a female GP, but I also happened to see an amazing one who actually listened to me, which is a whole other thing. I'm sure you already know this, but there was, sideline, a report that showed that 80% of women surveyed felt like their doctor didn't listen to them, or didn't take them seriously. Shocker, right? Exactly.
Shock.
Which checks out with like my experience.
Absolutely,
for sure.
yeah.
Anyway, so went and saw this doctor, and I think I even went for something else, and I was like, oh yeah, and then this thing happened to me, and I described the symptoms, kind of how this just kind of like very objectively running through, this is what happened, the series of events. And she looked at me and she just asked me one question. She said, did you feel like you were going to die? And I was like, yeah, like literally, yes.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, you had a panic attack, which, again, with the misinformation, lack of education, I always thought wrongly, the way that that term sounds, a panic attack, is like, ugh,
Yes. Yeah. You
you
You're out
panic.
of control. You're panicking. You're like fight or flight. Da, da, da.
Right.
Yeah.
Which actually is not that at all. It's your body packing up.
Yeah.
And I'm really impressed that when I learned about the biology of it, what she explained was your body, you know that you just need to look after the core organs. Your blood rushes to your heart and your brain, like your core organs. So that's why you're like, you don't need your fingers, your legs. We don't need these like superfluous limbs. We need your heart and your brain. So that's what was happening to me in that moment, was like your blood was just rushing to like look after the main things that you need to keep you alive.
Yeah.
How incredible was that?
It's honestly
so
like
incredible.
it never ceases to amaze me how amazing our bodies are.
Right.
Honestly.
Right. Exactly.
Honestly.
Exactly. And in entrepreneurship as well, how little attention we pay to the signs.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Yeah.
like when we're careering towards burnout and we keep going, we're pushing through, your body is giving you these signals for a reason. Anyway, so that basically, Sophie, that's set into, what's the phrase? That's set into motion. Thank you. That's set in motion this decade-long, literally, mission of looking into what happened to me and what's wrong with me.
Yeah. Because you mentioned that it came from a pain initially, right?
Yeah, a pain. And since that, in that time, I'm not going to go through the same level of detail storytelling with the next 9 years, but I've seen so many doctors, I've seen so many specialists, I've had blood tests, I've had MRI scans, I've had ultrasounds, I've had private healthcare.
Yeah.
I'm in a very privileged position. I'm a white woman with private healthcare.
Yeah.
And this is my experience.
Yeah.
Insane, absolutely insane. And extremely recently, around the time when we last spoke, this is like basically hot off the press.
Yeah.
Now almost a decade later, looking into it, doing our own research and trying all these different things, just come across this new condition, well, new to me, that I'd never heard of before, called adenomyosis, which don't know if I have it, because at the moment, the only way to definitively see if I do is to literally cut me open and do a hysterectomy and have a look at it. So after I die, maybe
you'll get a diagnosis.
Maybe I'll get a diagnosis, and you can put that on my tombstone.
Yeah. she had this. This is what it was,
we
guys.
Found out. That's what it was.
Honestly.
So there isn't really a way to definitively say for sure. Again, it's looking at kind of symptoms. Still really don't know if it is what I have, because I don't have all of the symptoms. There's lots of things that don't really marry up. There's things like it occurs more in older women.
Yeah.
After you've given birth, you're more likely to, which I haven't done. I'm in my 30s. There's all these things that it doesn't check out. I mean, I could be the outlier as well, but really what it is it's just, I mean, we say just, air quotes, but it is debilitating pain.
Yeah.
And coming back to your great framing of the question initially here that opened up this story, we're talking about business and entrepreneurship and progressing the female agenda. And Sophie, I've had moments, this is a monthly thing, this is a monthly debilitation, and it can strike at any moment, roughly, ish, within the month. I've had moments where I've been woken up from a deep sleep, and anyone who knows me, once I do struggle to get to sleep, but when I am actually asleep, I'm gone, I'm asleep. I'm not a light sleeper, but I've been woken from a deep sleep in agonizing pain that has led me to vomiting and just feeling like all these other horrific symptoms. I've collapsed from it. I mean, just I rarely vomit. I'm sorry, I know it's gross, but for it to be that bad to get me to that point, and then let alone, and like this particular instance was woken up from a deep sleep. I mean, this was like 4 or 5 in the morning. I had this episode that went on for hours. So then it's like, do I go back to sleep? I mean, I was absolutely knackered from the whole ordeal a few hours later.
Of course, yeah.
And then it's like, rearrange some meetings and calls because you're dying.
Yeah, literally.
You're like bedridden and like
yeah.
suffering. The other thing here as well is that particular episode being one of the extreme ones too. None of the Medicaid, this is the other kind of reason why it's also been a bit of a head fuck, excuse my language, but trying to figure out what this is the medication hasn't worked either. So that's also been like a head scratcher. So I've been prescribed things like mefenamic acid, naproxen, other over-the-counter just like painkillers, ibuprofen, paracetamol. I mean, ibuprofen is the closest, which is where you're like, okay, well, it's an indication, it's an inflammatory
thing,
kind
yeah.
of thing. I should define what adenomyosis is. I mentioned it before, but for people who don't know what it is if the muscle of your womb lining, or so your muscle grows into your womb lining,
yeah,
basically. But Google it. That's not my my medical definition.
We're not doctors.
But on the medication front, having this really extreme episode, and this is terrible to admit, but this is just to demonstrate the extremity of this, is my partner was prescribed codeine, from a like operation that he had a few years ago. We just so happened to have run out of the paracetamol. Well, I think I threw up the last paracetamol that we had in the house unknowingly. Gave me his codeine. It was the only. This is codeine. This is like this is highly addictive.
Yeah.
Do not recommend this to anyone listening. This is not medical advice whatsoever. But this is not to be taken lightly. This is what you're prescribed when you have a serious operation. I think I read also it's for like labor, like child labor, like the worst, the serious pain. So this is just to demonstrate like how extreme this pain is, that like codeine is the only thing that's like taking the edge off for me.
And that's not even making it go away.
Yeah.
That's just making it bearable.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you think about how you then have to show up in life when you are dealing with this, even if you are not in the midst of a real, you know, like you're not leaving your bed in that situation, but you've got that constant thing in you, that weight in your head, that constant space in your brain that is taken up by, is this going to happen today?
And this is exactly, you're absolutely on the money, Sophie. This is exactly what I was going to say, because what I'm talking about are these specific episodes, but given that this is a menstrual problem, that means it's a monthly thing. This happens every month. So exactly to your point, is like, what's next month going to be like? And the anxiety.
How do you manage your life around that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, now I have to pay much more attention to like the tracking, and this is where they were like, women are so organized, and we're the ones who like keep the household going and everything else. It's like, we need to be.
We fucking have to.
So
no one else is going to
do it, like, you know, taking the pill, whatever. It's like, we've got to keep on top of this stuff. So I have to track and try and sort of manage my diary around it. But I mean, Sophie, like, you mentioned in my intro with my 17 cajillion job titles, one of the things that I also do is public speaker. I go out and deliver keynotes. If that keynote that I'm paid 4 figures to go and deliver, if that just so happens on the day when you know, the planets misalign with it. I mean, I did a podcast heavily on codeine once. I was like, actually, we're in for a fun ride. Actually, I'm like,
buckle up, guys.
I'm like a Fruit Loop here, like high on codeine. So actually, that's a different version of Steph that you get for this one.
Yeah.
But it is, you're totally right. You're spot on the money, where it's like beyond the fact itself is around it, is then, even once you get over it, it's like, now the clock starts ticking for the next one.
Yeah.
So the anxiety sets in, and you don't know how bad it's, because they're not always that bad, and you don't really know why or how the cause. It's a little bit,
You're like, okay, it could be a 5 out of 10, or it could be a 10 out of 10, 20 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm going to be doing on that day, where I'm going to be.
And when it strikes.
Yeah. Am I going to be on stage?
Yeah, exactly. Like literally.
And the brands that you work with, like, that's your career, that's your livelihood, that's your reputation. And we sadly don't live in a world where women's health is widely spoken about or addressed or taken into consideration.
Then the salt in the wound on top of all of this is when you do go and seek help, which, by the way, even with private healthcare, I've had to wait 3 months for an appointment, which the NHS has fallen so far from grace that private healthcare has literally just taken its place in terms of the standard.
Oh. You are literally like...
This is the situation. The time you wait, the quality, everything is just a basic, decent expectation. It's nothing
Absolutely.
amazing.
Absolutely.
So I've had to wait months to even get the appointment. And then again, the salt in the wound is the dismissiveness, the lack of understanding that you get, and from female specialists as well, has been really shocking, genuinely really shocking.
Yep.
I've had the comments that I've had. I mean, one of the last ones, so I know you're bracing yourself to
No,
feel
go
angry at
on.
this, but like the comments that one of them said to me was like, well, you're coping. As if like, well, like, is it really that bad? Are you being, you know, insinuating like you seem to be doing fine? Like you're still standing, you're here.
How are we here?
It's disgusting.
And your story is so powerful, and I'm so sorry that you went through that. But I also think that there are hundreds of thousands of stories, probably millions, that are very similar to this. And to not have that safety net in your head of, it's fine, I'm going to go to the doctors, I'm going to get sorted, and I'm going to be fine because there's going to be a medication, or there's going to be a procedure, or there's going to be something that's going to fix this for me. And to not have that safety blank, especially when we are privileged enough to live in a first world country, to not be able to access that basic healthcare, because gynecology isn't a nice to have as much as we've been told that it is. And I think even when you think about America, like it's quite normal to have a gynecologist.
Right.
It's not here.
Yeah.
I've only very recently seen one.
Comparing the UK health to the US.
I mean, yeah.
Like how bad does it have to be, right?
Exactly.
To draw those comparisons.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly that.
And we were saying before as well, you know, like I only, again, as embarrassing as it is to admit, like I discovered PCOS because of Grace Beverly.
Yeah.
I've said this to you before.
Exactly. Exactly.
This goes to show I'm learning about women's conditions through an influencer.
Yeah. And in all fairness to Grace, she's probably giving you more education than your own GP could.
Yeah, for sure.
And
1000%.
and it's so interesting that with my own women's health issues of PCOS and PMDD, the solution that I was given was hysterectomy. And that's the solution that you were also given.
Wow.
And okay, so we have to go to such extreme lengths to solve this problem.
Yeah.
We'll just remove your womb.
Just cut it out.
Okay, because that's a really easy decision to make, and that's like a really, you know, surgery that we should just really take lightly. And like you said, you're coping and you're surviving. But what does that, when we talk about business and when we talk about, you know, going into a pitch in front of a VC, or you've got a really important meeting or whatever it is, and you're dealing with that in your head
on top of it,
and we just get on with it because that's all we've been told and trained to do.
But I think we need to play games we can win. And I think we need to focus on, yes, not at all dismissing the challenges, whether it's the investment industry, how hard it is to be an entrepreneur, generally anyway, the health conditions that may be against us as women, but all of the amazing superpowers that we do have to make it work. So I think as lovely as you've been complimenting me, it's like, okay, well, I still did this. Like, there's proof. Yeah. You still do it. You pull yourself to, like, and I think, thankfully now, where we have got more tolerance and we've got flexible working, and thankfully I'm in a position where I can say, so sorry, I'm going to have to push back my meetings. Yeah. It's no big deal. I'll speak to you tomorrow. So, like, we need to, I'm just cognizant of not dwelling too much on, like, the setbacks and the things that are in our way and our hurdles and challenges, not to be dismissive or not to say that they don't exist. They are a factor. If we can change the system, if we can get more women in investing roles, women in power, women decision makers, and then men within that as well. Yeah. We need the male allies, then fantastic. But in the meantime, you've got what it takes. There's so many great positive things that we have all got to make this work. So it is absolutely possible. It's not an impossible feat. You can definitely do it.
And I think that is just such a perfect summary of this entire conversation, in the sense of, when we talk about confidence, women just have no idea how strong they actually are.
Thank you.
And like, we look at the success of women in 2025, despite everything we have just spoken about, and that fear that holds so many of us back. We're so much more resilient and powerful than we think we are. So on that
Amen.
note,
Good mic drop moment.
yeah, literally, just some final kind of fun little wrap up questions for you that I think would be so valuable to our audience. We reached out to the Ray community to ask them what was their number one question that they wanted to ask you. And believe it or not, it was, how did you get Simon Squibb on your podcast? I think there's a lot of women that are nervous to shoot their shot and don't even know where to start with collaborations, influencers, brands. And that was the most asked question, Steph. So I am the voice from the community. Can you just
put everyone out their misery?
Yeah. Can you just tell us, how did you land such a huge entrepreneur?
I am going to steal a great quote from an amazing woman who, annoyingly, her name has just had a mind blank. I will find her name and share with us to put it in the show notes.
We can link to her.
I should have thought this before. Her first name is Debbie. Okay, so the thing is that her nickname is like Debbie Doodah.
Okay.
And I've forgotten her surname. So her name is Debbie Doodah. If you just search that in like LinkedIn, you'll find her.
We will find her.
So citing my source on this, credit to her for what I'm about to say, which is, we've got fingers and eyes.
Yep.
We've got 10 fingers, we've got 2 eyes. It has never been easier to do something like get Simon Squibb on your podcast.
Yeah.
He is accessible. She used the fingers and eyes thing because of like typing, if that wasn't clear. I'm using my fingers if you're not watching me, but like typing, messaging, using your device to get to that person. It's easier than it has ever been before. What I would say, and I can actually explain the really interesting exact steps as to how that ended up happening. But what I want to say just first off is there's also, to your point on like shooting your shot, for every Simon Squibb, there's 10 others that have said no.
Yeah.
And rejected me.
Yeah.
Like, let's be clear. You see the tip of the iceberg. You see the show reel on social media. You see everyone's highlights reel. For every Simon Squibb, there have been 10 others who have rejected me. Yeah. And I'm still chasing them down today.
Good for you.
And I'm still chasing them down and they've still said no. They've said no to me so many times. So that whole thing of like being persistent, like keep being determined, like keep trying, like is just totally true. With Simon in particular, so very interestingly, which by the way, I have to say is definitely not one of the best interviews I've done on my show. So if anyone's seen that, I would definitely encourage you to go and listen to some of the other ones.
You have had so many amazing guests. I think I have. Simon's just such a hot topic at the moment,
exactly.
Isn't he? So I think
it's the name. It's the name. In terms of interview, definitely check out, I did a top 5 recap of 2024. So there's definitely some other really great ones I would definitely encourage listening to. But with Simon in particular, we actually connected on LinkedIn a really long time ago. So again, one of these like LinkedIn connections.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Reading back on our old conversation before we'd ever met each other, before Simon Squibb exploded, he actually tried to do his own podcast years ago called Something Else Completely Different.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Yes,
he had this passion project.
Yep.
Does this ring some bells for you?
Yeah, it does.
This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And he was sharing what he was working on, and I didn't know who this guy was. He's obviously just a random LinkedIn connection. So like, cool, okay, nice. I'm also thinking of doing something. And it's just really funny going back and looking at those. And then through operating in similar worlds, so this is another thing, I've actually delivered a successful session on hacking luck, which check that out afterwards because there's a lot of this.
We're going to link to that.
With how you can stack the odds in your favour. So this Simon Squibb story is like a lot of this you can apply.
Yeah.
So operating in similar circles, it's like that financial strategy I shared before. Find the biggest pile of cash and get as close as possible to it.
Yeah.
So if you know Simon Squibb is going to be speaking at an event, or someone or an investor or a client or someone in particular, you can be strategic about it. Like they're going to promote, they're going to be speaking at an event, get there half an hour early. Or make sure you ask them a question in the Q&A so you're visible and they see your face. Corner them afterwards. Like, we need to get out of our own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely amazing how much we get in our own way. The excuses, the spotlight effect, there's so many things that we do. We're putting up our own blockers and barriers. Mm-hmm. So get out your own way. So anyway, so as I said, we were connected from years ago on LinkedIn anyway. We actually just so happened to both be judges for the Hustle Awards. So that did work. That was a stroke of luck. That did work in my favour, where not only were we put in the same room, but also positioning wise, I'm there as a fellow judge alongside Simon Squibb. So it's not as if I'm kind of, a bare, like,
you could approach him as a peer almost.
Right,
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
Talk to him. The other thing I need to mention here as well is Simon is lovely. He is such a sweetheart.
Is he how he comes
He's
across?
exactly the same. He's exactly the same.
I love that.
And so I mention that as well because there's only so much in your control.
Yeah.
So there's another thing here, which is like controlling the controllable. So as much as I've had 10 other Simon Squibbs reject me, like Simon is a lovely guy and he wants to help, So
you can really
I can't
feel
control that.
Yeah, 100%.
I can't control him saying yes.
Yeah.
I can do everything I can to like increase the chances of it happening. But ultimately he's a lovely guy. So that's another factor. So it's like connected for a while, in the same room as judges, spoke. He's a lovely guy. Saw him again at another event that he spoke at, chatted to him afterwards. And then was an absolute pest with his assistant trying to get a date in the diary. And then this is the other really important element of this whole story, is it took like 18 to 24 months to get that interview done. So that's the other thing. Do you see the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah.
He was booked in to do a real life studio interview like this now, which I do mine in person too.
Yeah.
And he had to move and change it like 3 or 4 different times.
And every time I bet you were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Come on,
Right.
keep going.
And then the other lesson here too is eventually, after you've been like plugging away and trying to get that date in for a year, 18, a year and a half to 2 years almost, is I also needed to compromise something I never wanted to, which was doing it virtually and doing it as a Zoom interview, which is another reason why I don't think it's one of the best ones that I've done. So it's like, you also then need to look at, there's so many parallels that you can take here and apply to whatever your situation is. So you've got the like, number one is the clear vision, the clear goal.
Yeah.
So another thing, sorry, which I didn't touch on, is on my background on my phone, I have my goals.
I love that.
And I specifically had Simon Squibb as a guest I wanted to interview, and you look at it every day. So you've got, number one, you've got the clear goal.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times I look at someone else having success on social, and then I feel jealous, and then afterwards I'm like, I didn't even want that anyway. Why did I even want something I don't even have?
Comparisonitis, isn't it? That's exactly it.
So focus on you. What is it that you want? See what you can do to stack the odds in your favour. Be resilient, like be determined, keep going. And then, like this eventual Zoom, do you need to negotiate something? What actually matters here? Does it matter getting Simon in person and potentially risking that never happening, or happening years and years down the line, or if it does happen, or saying, okay, fine, we've got to work. Like, he's obviously got a huge following, he's an incredibly busy guy. This is just the way we're going to have to make it work. Yeah. So that's kind of what you just need to suck up to make it happen.
Absolutely.
So I hope the Ray community is satisfied with that
I'm sure
answer.
they will be. I'm sure they will be. And I think that's just such a perfect way to close this episode. And that's just such a perfect example of being faced with that real play it to win or play it safe, dynamic and how we all approach things, and you are definitely playing to win, Steph. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
this
you
was
for
such
having
an
me.
amazing chat. I have learnt so much just listening to you. So yeah, thank you so much.
Good, great. Thank you so much for having me. I really hope your listeners have taken some value away from this as well.
Oh,
So
I'm sure they will have.
Great.
So, yeah, thank you.